Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight, where we're gonna have a live chat about the play that just recently went online for the week in conjunction with National Day, right? And as you would know, the play is called Merdeka slash Tuli. Not sure about that tone there. And the Tamil name for it is Sutantaram. Yeah. Okay. So as you can see, they have actually four windows right now. Unfortunately, one of our guests, Miss Jo Kukathas, who's from Kuala Lumpur, she's experiencing some connection issues at the moment. But we will see if she can get it fixed later, and she'll be joining us later. Yeah. So as you would know, these things happen. uh, the precarity that I think a lot of us are feeling is also sometimes reflected in the precarity of some of these connections as well, right? So, as some of you would know, watching Zoom plays and watching live chats and all that, sometimes we are let down by certain digital infrastructures and connections, etc. Yeah. Okay, but never mind. Hope springs eternal. We will wait for Miss Jo and hope that she's able to recover her connection. All right. So just a very brief introduction. My name is Alfian Sa'at. I am the resident playwright of Warais. We've been doing a lot of these live chats with Warais over the past couple of months. We took a break for at least a month, actually, and so many things have happened in July since then. We had elections. A lot of things have been happening, and still we are in a state. We are in phase two, but I think we're still a lot of us experiencing that sense of no future, right? Or the idea of the future is just crumbling before our eyes. So, not to sound pessimistic, but to say actually that if we've got no future, it's the best time to actually talk about the past. And therefore, that's what we're going to do today. Welcome to the History Channel. And we're going to have this discussion on Merdeka. And I'm going to introduce all our panelists for today. Yeah. Or rather, I will let them do their own introductions. I'll just pull them out and they can introduce themselves. So, first, let's have Wong.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm an actor, and I was in Merdeka. I played the character Sue, among a whole host of other characters.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay. The next person we'll have is Brendon.
Hi, I'm Brendon. I'm also an actor. I was also in Merdeka, and I played the character Francis along with other characters as well as we told these stories that each of us brought to the reading group.
Thank you so much, Brendon. Okay. And last but not least, we have Lisa.
Hi, Lisa here. I'm a historian. I've watched Merdeka 3 times, twice live performance, and then once on screen. Just loved it.
Wow. Wow. We have a super fan right there. Although, I mean, she's doing her research also for this talk. Yeah. So for those of you who managed to watch it online, thank you for watching on Vimeo, and we hope it's given you a lot of food for thought. So as usual, we will start these sessions with a little slideshow where we talk a little bit about some of the inspirations for the play. We talk a little bit about the content for the play as well. Yeah. And there we go. Merdeka live chat with our guest historian, Hong Lysa. Okay, let's go to the first slide. Okay, so the man of the hour, or rather the man of the year being 1819 and also 2019. This is, of course, Thomas Never Raffles. And there's a little biography of him there. I just want to ask Z and Brendon, did you learn about this when he was born and when he died and Raffles' career when you were studying history in school?
Must have. Can't say I remembered.
Okay. Yeah. What about you, Brendon?
I don't think I knew very much about definitely nothing before 1819.
Right. Okay.
I'm not sure I knew 1819 either, to be honest, but
Mm,
maybe that's the only thing that was taught in school. But yeah.
yeah.
It was more like there was a Raffles institution that
Right.
I but
Yeah.
or Raffles Girls' School, really. That's
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, what did you know about Raffles based on what you studied in school?
That he
Yeah.
founded Singapore, really. But I guess there wasn't much of a character, a portrait or anything like that. So
Right.
you assume things, right? You assume that he's a good man. You assume that he's a kind man. You assume things.
Yeah, and I think in that picture, I mean, he does look like quite a nice guy. Huh? He's a flattering portrait of him. But Lisa, I'm just wondering, like, when you were studying history in school, was Raffles quite prominent in the syllabus?
When I was studying history in school, I don't think there was a history of Singapore even. We
Wow.
studied
Okay.
history of Malaya, and I'm talking about the 1960s.
Right. Okay. Right. But within that history of Malaya, did they touch on Raffles at all?
I don't think so. I mean, he must have been mentioned, yes, but you
Yep.
know, like the kind of focus that he has come to be given. I think in the 80s, perhaps.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. We have got a comment here from one of our audience member viewers who says Raffles was not a nice guy. So yes, looks can be deceiving, and of course, when you get a portrait commission of yourself, and this portrait was done by George Francis Joseph, I think, a famous portrait painter. I think you would want the nicest parts of you to be captured. So obviously, this being a portrait and not a photograph, we can see the ways in which it's curated, right? It's as good as us on Instagram these days using all our filters to project the best versions of ourselves. Okay, next slide. So we did something with Raffles' face, and this is inspired by Sex Pistols album cover, of course. So we got all the collage and all the strips of paper that's being torn out. We also decided on having just these three words in the title, not just, sorry, but these three words in the titles, and to not have any English translation for that. Yeah. But as Lisa would probably point out, the term Merdeka actually transcended all the linguistic boundaries and sort of like resonated across all the various communities, right, Lisa?
Yes, I don't think the Chinese in Singapore shouted Tuli. Everyone shouted Merdeka.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. So I also wanted to say that we wanted this multilingual thing also as a, so as much as we're aware that historically, Merdeka was understood by everyone practically, but this was an attempt to think about how do we decolonize things like title, for example. How do we, put the English out and try to find ways to foreground or center all the other non-English languages. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the man himself in various avatars and incarnations all over near the river. Okay, so let's talk about the first one, which is the bronze one, which is in front of Victoria Memorial Hall. Lisa, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, right. I think the statue was carved in 1887 and brought over for the
Right.
Jubilee, Queen Victoria's Jubilee. This wasn't the original spot. It was brought over to the Victoria Memorial Hall was built in honor of the Queen as well. So it was brought over. It was brought over for the centenary.
That's right. Yeah. So that was like a 100-year celebration, right? And that became one of the focal celebrations in that year.
Yeah. It was more elaborate. Sorry, it was a more elaborate sort of setup with sort of, I don't know what to call those things, but there was a floral kind of
right. Yes. So there was a
stone and things. But those were destroyed in the Second World War, I believe.
Right. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. The one in the picture doesn't reflect that, but there were these huge Doric columns, right, behind to sort of like showcase it. I also want to say that Lisa is, of course, a historian, But of course, all historians have their specialties. And I'm sorry that I just sprung that on you just now, Lisa. As in, like, I very casually said, "Oh, Lisa, do you want to just talk about this statue?" But of course, Lisa, if I'm not wrong, during her time, during her career in NUS, for example, I mean, her specialty was Thai history. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, of late, she's been writing a lot of books focusing on Singapore history, especially the history in the 50s and 60s. Okay. All right. So let's talk also about the replica, which is at Boat Quay. And that's a polymarble replica, the white color one. Yeah. You see that on the bottom left. And that was produced by the Singapore Tourism Board to commemorate, I suppose, Raffles' landing site. Yeah. Okay, so we have a little comment here from Chikian who says that actually the original position of the Raffles statue was in the middle of the Padang. And then he says it was then brought to the riverfront. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chikian, for that. Yeah. Okay, so that's the 1972. So that's why we have two Raffles, right? It's not necessarily like black Raffles and white Raffles. It's not like evil Raffles and good Raffles. It's actually a touristy thingy that the Singapore Tourism Board wanted to plant on the banks of the Singapore River. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about what happened in 2019 during the Bicentennial. So we have that image in the middle, but let's first talk about the image on the right. This interesting stunt where Raffles is doing a hide and seek. Yeah. Did anyone see this in person? No, huh? So you just saw all the images circulating in the newspapers and online, right? Yeah. So I feel it's interesting because it's a kind of camouflage where I think they're trying to show, okay, we are not so reverential towards Raffles. We can actually be critical or to question his prominence in Singapore history. And by doing that, we're going to make him disappear. But not really disappear. Right? Yeah. Like a bit cheat my feelings for that, right? Okay, what do you think of this? I mean, how do you read this illusion? Anyone?
Well, this this gimmick did not last very long. And in fact, curiously, the Straits Times reported on it like the day that, and the day that the last day of it being featured.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's a bit of an ambivalence.
Right.
How far can we go?
Right.
Right. But on the other hand, it may be something that I wouldn't sort of fully comprehend. This Instagram age or whatever it is, so you pop up and you disappear, and then there's the next thing, and that's the third that's a photo at the bottom that comes out, so attention just there.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right, Lisa. I think it is a photo op. And I think that's the nature of it, that it's supposed to be, as you mentioned, words like pop-up, etc. It's all about temporary interventions, right? Yeah. So for me, because of the impermanence of it, it really does strike one as a kind of gimmick. Chiken has got a comment here where he says Raffles, the original bronze Raffles, the dark one, was stepping on a map of Southeast Asia. So this is true. Yeah. And during the course of researching for the play, we found out that during the centenary celebrations, when he talked about the statue being shifted from the Padang 2 in front of the Memorial Hall, they realized that when they took down the statue, they said the sculptor, who is Mr. Thomas Woolner, had included his own private joke. Right? Is this your line, Brendon or Z? One of you said this line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was my line, yeah.
Right, yeah. So he was actually stepping on a map of Malaya. Right? So I think a lot of people don't really know this. It's one of those things where only if you're sort of face to face with him, you'll be able to look down and see, oh my gosh, he's actually stepping on a map of Malaya. So this idea that it's just kind of like an innocent statue of a founder, that's not entirely true, because when you're stepping on a map, it's about conquest, right? It's about laying claim to a certain territory. Okay, and maybe we'll talk about that last intervention before we take some of the questions that's been pouring in. So that last one is the image that we see in the center, where Raffles is not so lonely anymore and is surrounded by 4 other historical figures. And apparently this installation is called The Arrivals, right? It's got a name. And those other 4 historical figures include Sang Nila Utama, who, in the official bicentennial history, apparently arrived in 1299. And then the other 3 figures are Tan Tock Seng, Narayanan Pillai, as well as Munshi Abdullah, all of whom supposedly came with Raffles. Yeah. Any thoughts on that? What do you think of Raffles' buddies?
I'm sad that there are no women there.
Right. Okay. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I think that definitely was one of the critiques of this particular installation. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Any other comments? Any other thoughts about it?
It's very CMIO.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, I mean, it kind of plays directly into how we think about, the official narrative on race and representation in Singapore. I guess that's what I see.
No, absolutely. I think, you do see that kind of multiracial ideology being represented there in the actual form of statues. Yeah. Okay, great. I'm gonna pull up quite a few comments and questions as well. So just now we were talking about Raffles being camouflaged against that OCBC building, is it? Yeah. So Vicky has a comment, and he says that I take that statue painting as the skyline directly embodying Raffles. Though he is camouflaged, his outline is still there, a shadow of spectre perhaps almost living on through the infrastructure and banks and wealth of Singapore. Yeah, I think that's such a wonderful observation and comment. People have also said that, the fact that Raffles is blending into a bank says a lot about how global banking sort of like still perpetuates certain imperial structures, right? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. We got a few other comments as well. Halim Yo says that the government wants us to think that Singapore is an island that floated away from the Isle of Wight and somehow ended itself at the tip of South Johor. Yeah, that's an interesting observation. Thanks for that comment. Patricia Tobin has got a question. Okay, but if it's meant to be a CMIO representation, what does it mean if only the white man remains? Yeah, it's a good question, because obviously this was temporary as well, right? If you go to that space right now, it's only Raffles left. Actually, for the whole of last year, they tried to let the other statues remain for a while, but at the banks of the river. But as I understand it, those have also been removed, right? So yeah, it's somehow back to square one again. Yeah, we're still back to Raffles. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as one of the things that happened last year, we had a Bicentennial Experience. But before I go there, there's a comment by Vidya Subramaniam, who says, and yet it isn't quite CMIO, cause is Munshi Abdullah just Malay? Yeah. Which box is Sang Nila Utama supposed to be in? I saw it as a subtle questioning of CMIO. Okay. This is interesting. Yeah, because it's true. I think that there's some kind of like contestations regarding Sang Nila Utama, for example. I know there's been some conversations about what's his actual lineage, in the sense that if you look at the Sejarah Melayu, the genealogy of kings, right, you will find quite a fantastical family tree that traces him all the way back to Alexander the Great. So he's got a bit of Macedonian in him. And then there's Raja Chulan, who is an Indian or Indic king. And of course, Munshi Abdullah himself as a Peranakan Malay / Indian / right. So obviously, during his time, those kinds of racial categories haven't quite become quite rigid as they are right now. Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, sis Vidya, for your comment. Okay. Let's talk a little bit also about this event they were supposed to celebrate the bicentennial, which is called the Bicentennial Experience at Fort Canning. And as I understand it, both Z and Brendon, you went to visit this, yeah?
Yeah, we did. We
Yes.
had like an excursion
yeah.
from rehearsal one day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about it. Take us through what it was like to be visitors.
It was very eye-opening, I guess, to
Okay.
revisit the official narrative of history.
Right.
It was after I watched or went through the experience that I realized the significance of Merdeka and how important it was that we told the stories, the histories that are in the play.
Right.
I think it was also a bit surreal because Brendon voiced several of the sequences there, so it was. I want to know what it was like for him actually.
I know. Choose a side, Brendon. Which side are you on? Like, what's this sitting on the fence thing? What's this like playing both sides? Yeah.
It was if it was surreal for Z, it was really surreal for me. Because I mean, I think I said this during one of the talkbacks during the run.
Yep.
Like, I had recorded the Bicentennial Experience before we started rehearsal on Merdeka, before I read Alfian and Haibin's script, and found all the other sides of stories that I never learned in school, I never knew. So at the time when I recorded the script for the Bicentennial, it was like, yeah, this seems about right. I mean, this seems fairly uncontroversial. And then I think at the point that we went to see it, we were about a week plus in rehearsal. I was going, oh no, like, and I felt really culpable actually going through this, going, oh no, what have we done? But I think it's very interesting to see how Merdeka's telling of history and the sort of the official narrative differ in remembering these figures and these events. For different purposes.
Right. Yeah. I also do say at a lot of these forums, I also say that I don't think Merdeka is an anti-bicentennial play. You know, I still think it's part of the whole commemorations in that year. I feel, you know, I don't think it stands outside of all those kinds of ways of remembering. I just feel that a lot of it depends on how you bracket your history. A lot of it depends on what you want to give emphasis to, right? Because I don't necessarily think the history that we are receiving in at the Bicentennial Experience is fabricated. It's not, right? It's just about which particular elements you're putting together to construct this history. Yeah. So I just want to put it out there that I don't think there is a wrong, there's this idea of a wrong history. That's my opinion, but I would love to hear what Lisa thinks. Yeah.
Well, I think the Bicentennial office.
Yeah.
If you ask them what is the Bicentennial about, they'll be saying that it is an exercise in reflection. And I think Merdeka is very, very reflective.
Right.
So it's not, well, okay, you want to say it's not anti-bicentennial, but no, I think it is in the spirit of the bicentennial, in the best spirit of the bicentennial. And it should be taken in that sense.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah. But what about that question of, are there wrong ways to write history?
Wrong ways to write history. Yes, of course there is. But what you mean, what I would understand by that term is that it is bad history.
Right. Okay.
It's bad history, not the positioning as such, but how do you buttress your arguments? Do they stand scrutiny, intimidation, and things like that?
Okay, great. Thank you. I've got a comment here, from Salil Tripathi, who's asking, why did SIA, Singapore Airlines, change the name of his business class, Raffles class? Yeah, so now it's just called business class, right? If I'm not wrong. And he asked, was it to acknowledge his controversial past? Oh, this is an interesting question. What would you all think? Shall we ask SIA after this panel? Shall we? because I think they would
Yes,
know.
Alfian, we should.
We should, right? Because I think they would know best. I feel like, yeah, I should. I think they have a lot of time because most of the planes are kind of like grounded right now. And I think they would be able to entertain them. But this is an interesting thing to speculate. Yeah. What has there been any organizations, bodies, whatever, that's maybe realizing that, certain maybe not so savory facts about Raffles are coming out into the open and becoming part of a wider conversation. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Any other comments about this bicentennial experience? Nah.
No.
What did you think of the rain? Yeah. So just to fill in the audience members, at the end of this whole experience, we were all ushered into a room, and then we were given umbrellas, right? And then there was artificial rain. So there were videos of especially one a National Day celebrations in which it rained and people were still standing in the rain, braving the rain, and I think that became a kind of metaphor for ruggedness and resilience and etc. Uh, which made me question, like, then how come I got umbrella? I mean, like, what does this say about me? How come all these people are braving the rain and then I have umbrella? Does it mean like me of this strawberry generation kind of thing? Am I like, is this judgment on the person I am? I don't know. Yeah.
Very existential moment there.
Right? Yeah. Like, do I be macho and not use the rain and be like those people in the videos or what? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, Repo has a comment here and he says, perhaps a good way to write history is one that empowers the people. And he says a bad history is definitely one that erases cultures and stories for control. Yeah. So I know there's a lot of debates about this, right? There are books like The Use and Abuse of History, for example. Yeah. What did you think of that comment just now, Lisa? A good way to write history is one that empowers the people. Yeah. Would you like to respond?
I think in fact that's the debate about the book, isn't it? Does it empower people or does it disempower people?
Right.
I think it's so clear cut. No book would say I'm here to disempower the person or the people.
Right.
So in the end, yes, it is the quality of the work. Okay, and it depends on the professional. I think the professional integrity of a historian.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. No, I like that. I think implicit in that is a kind of political neutrality. That somehow your professional ethics might mean that you don't necessarily write history on the side of power. But I also wonder whether it's so easy to not get entangled into
yes, that is what I mean by the professionalism. I've been called or labeled a alternative historian,
right?
And I rejected any adjective to the word historian. I find that a historian is a historian. Alternative history has to be good history before it's meaningful.
Right. Okay.
If it's look at me, I'm a star, because I write people's history. I don't think that works.
Right. Okay. No, that is great that you're bringing it to the fundamentals of either good or bad history, because as you mentioned, sometimes I feel these adjectives they kind of tend to muddy the feel when you say that someone is a court historian, meaning that someone is close to the centers of power, and then when you say someone is a revisionist historian, I think sometimes those things obfuscate rather than really illuminate the issues that are at stake. Yeah. Shall we move on? Do you have a response to that, Lisa?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you look very thoughtful. But anytime, if you want to jump in anytime, seriously, don't need to for me to call you up. Okay, great. So let's go to the next slide. And please keep on coming with your interesting questions. They're very good questions. Okay, so this is yet another inspiration for our play, which is the Rhodes Must Fall movement. Yeah, and as you can see, there's a protest movement that began in 2015, initially directed at a statue of Cecil Rhodes at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, and then it developed into a wider movement to decolonize education. Yeah, so I was definitely inspired by this name, which became the title of the reading group in the play, which is Raffles Must Fall. Yeah, and of course, currently also we are experiencing an interesting moment, which was sparked by the death of George Floyd in the United States and the Black Lives Matter movement. And it has had a tremendous global ripple effect, and which has resulted in a lot of reckoning for various other statues, yeah, including Colston in Liverpool, who was believed to have profited from the Atlantic slave trade. Also King Leopold in Belgium as well. Yeah, and I think for a very brief moment, there was a short kind of discussion I saw online about whether the Raffles statue should be part of this global movement. Yeah, to remove them. Yeah, but I don't think it had a lot of traction. What do you think?
Well, I think even the play Merdeka was, sort of how to say, you don't end up with people sort of raising their fists and say let's destroy the statue.
Right, yeah.
So I think that caught the kind of situation that we are living in.
Yeah. I think people were quite cautious and circumspect about violent acts of iconoclasm, right? Yeah, I think that there was still a kind of guardedness to it. But I wonder, I mean, if we were to remove it in kind of civil way, use a crane and get professionals to remove it, what do you think?
Who is the we?
Who's the we? Yes, good question. Yeah. Okay, something to ponder. Okay, next slide. Yeah, who has that power, right? Okay, so this is some of my research materials that I looked through, and I believe two of Lisa's books are there, which is the May 13th Generation, as well as Living in a Time of Deception, which is co-authored with Dr. Po Su Kai. There's also one of Lisa's books, which she co-authored with Huang Qian Li, which is not there, which is one of my favorite books, actually. I highly recommend it to everyone. It is called Scripting a National History, Singapore and Its Past. And that was the book that really awakened me to the possibilities of like understanding how history was written. And I think the idea that of history being scripted, I was very attracted to that, because as a theater person, it just resonated with me, this idea that history and dramaturgy might be similar, that there would be protagonists and antagonists, that Singapore story, one of its tellings was about triumphing over the communists or whatever, right? Or taming the communist tiger. So that made me really open my eyes and have this other view of what history is. So someone has jumped in to say, my absolute favorite book on Singapore history. So Lisa, you have another fan. Okay. So Salil says, can you provide this list of books as it is hard to read the titles? Yeah, I hear you, Salil, and I'd like to direct you to the Warais website, where we actually have a program of the play Merdeka, and on one page of the program, we actually have this image as well. Yeah. So yes, you can please visit our website. Okay. There's a question here by Futin Wong, who asks, if Raffles must fall, would another rise in his place instead? Okay, interesting question. What do you think? Will there always be this sort of great man figure founder in our history?
I'd like to think not. I mean, that would be my preference. I don't know how realistic a preference that is, but I'd like to think that we can, like you said, Alfian, move away from the sort of great man or single author of civilization for a country. Yeah, I think that's not a helpful
Right.
narrative.
But
for
what
me.
do you think of people who say that, Raffles was here just for a few months? Actually, a lot of people did the heavy lifting, including William Farquhar and John Crawford, right? So, do you think these other figures should also be commemorated? Or you just don't
Where do
want
we
this
where do we
white
draw
man?
the line? Where do
Right,
we
okay.
draw the line? When do we
Mm.
say like, okay, that person's contribution needs to be marked, but not that person?
Okay.
I don't know. I think that's why I've always been very jaded about history.
Mm.
I'm
Why?
sure if I had taken Dr. Lisa's class, I wouldn't
Yeah.
feel that way. Because
Yeah.
I know that Lisa, you conduct a class on what is history. I think just a class on that question is so interesting. But like studying history itself was just always so reductive in my experience. Very boring.
Okay. Yeah, I think when I was in secondary school also, there was that stereotype, right? That history is basically, oh, you need to memorize dates. That was the first thing that people always say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Alfian, back to your
Go ahead.
question about Raffles was here only for 8 months. How about Farquhar and John Crawford? Should we memorialize them instead? Well, the thing is that they're all colonial.
Right.
In fact, I think Raffles, Farquhar, and Crawford were servants or were employees of the East India Company. We weren't even under the Crown yet, or even under British India yet at this point. Right. So, does it make a difference whether it's one or the other? I think, following what Brendon says, certainly not them. Not to say another set. Another set of men is another question, but certainly not this set.
Okay. Yes. Good. Okay. Great. Good response there. I have a question from Kirsten, who I guess is looking at this pile of books and asking, Alfian, given the sheer volume of materials, was it tough selecting the slices of history you wanted to highlight? And what did you try to give bracket to? Okay. Great question. And I think for me, one of the things that sort of dictated what stories I would choose was actually the characters. So if I had 6 characters and each of them was gonna choose a story, I sort of thought, and one of the thesis in the play is that some of these anti-colonial or maybe like nationalist histories are tied into certain races or communities. So that's one of the things that I thought about. Yeah. So like maybe the Malay character, she wants to tell a Malay story, a Malay anti-colonial story, the Chinese one. Yeah. And that's one of the things in which we argued in the play, could we ever transcend the colonial legacies of race and racial classification? Yeah. Okay. Actually, there's a big question from Hieronymus Ma, who's got a really long question, which has managed to block 2 of you, but I will read this here. Hieronymus asks, I have a question to Alfian. Merdeka talks about the importance and need for decolonization to happen in Singapore, yet at the same time, the play is made possible or framed by the very instruments or structures that colonialism has introduced into Singapore. Something that the play acknowledges is framing the narratives into racial groups, use of English, etc. So if we follow Audre Lorde's in understanding that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, this is a very long question. I'm going to look for part 2. There we go. Oh, there's no part 2. But I think he's asking a question about how is it possible to decolonize, right? Okay, let's look at this part. I was also wondering whether one reason why colonialism is seen in a more favorable light compared to our Southeast Asian counterparts is because we associate it as a form of cultural or symbolic capital. So much of Singapore's scientific knowledge historically is derived from what is now the Singapore National Museum, which was the hub of botanical or zoological research in Southeast Asia in the 1800s. And then a lot of schools founded in Singapore were missionary schools, St. Margaret, St. Joseph, etc., in order to promote. Okay, so his comments are very long, but I can't seem to find the other half. They seem to be broken off and might have been floating somewhere else. But anyway, those are interesting observations. Anyone wants to answer actually what I feel is a very big question? The first one he asked, which is, in what ways can we decolonize when, our structures of feeling, when so much of our systems is built on a colonial foundation?
Well, actually, Alfian, he directed the question at you.
Well spotted, Z. I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I might want to hold on to this for later. Maybe go through. Oh, sorry. Melissa says there is no second part to that question. So it's not missing at all. There's apparently, dot. Okay. Dot to be continued, but I don't know where the continuation is. But anyway, Junhao says, if I'm not wrong, the great man theory history stems from Thomas Carlyle. Maybe we can consider alternative modes of historical inquiry, for example, the longue durée, etc. Yeah. Lisa, you want to validate Junhao as a historian yourself?
Oh, sure. I mean, great men history. Yes, Carlyle, 19th century, 18th century, whatever it is. How am I going to put it? Yeah.
Should we look at other approaches? Yeah.
It's not a very, I don't think explicitly it's a very common trope anymore, though in the end it will still end up that way.
Okay, right.
It's like an economic history and so forth, but it depends.
Okay, great. But definitely the
reading, if it's a great man type of history, right?
Right, yeah. So I think we can say quite safely that the field has pluralized, right? And we've also seen a lot of other alternative approaches. Okay, shall we move on to the next slide? So there we go. I just want to remind everyone that actually Merdeka has two directors. Yeah, I mean, one was supposed to join us, but I think her connection is still not very good. So another time then, Mr. Jo Kukathas, and the other director is Mr. Glenn Gui. Okay, next slide. And of course, Merdeka, we had 6 actors, 6 really wonderful and very hardworking actors. And as you can see in those images, they are acting, they are dancing, they are learning musical instruments. So one question for each of you, Z and Brendon. What was the most difficult thing for you in the process of making Merdeka?
Do you want to go first, Z? Or should I?
Wow, I don't think there is like a single no, I was tempted to say one of the instruments that I had to pick up probably, but I think the hardest thing was to thread a character's journey through all those stories and make sense of it, and to dramaturgically pull out as many layers from each story as we could. Okay, but that's all boring, like actors, work kind of thing. So maybe I should stick to my
actor studio kind of interview. Yeah.
Of course not. The focus here is history, right? No, but I think I think at one point when I was told I had to learn one more musical instrument, I think I almost cried.
Oh gosh. Okay.
No, but I mean, but those are beautiful memories now.
Right. Wow. How many instruments do you think you had to learn in this play?
I think we learned like 4 or 5, because that we would be told we needed to play one. Then after that, the decision was made that we needed to switch to another to make it work. Right, by the way, we had 5 weeks. It wasn't like we had 5 months.
Yes, it was quite a crash course in all these skills. What about you, Brendon?
It was definitely the skills that's the hardest part. I focused on the things I need to learn and the skills, and there were a lot of them. And I even saying that, I know that I lucked out. Like, I didn't have to do the most difficult stuff. I didn't have to do any dance, which is my Achilles heel. I did have to learn to play instruments, which I did not that well, and learned a few, but eventually got given like the gong, which I'm very grateful for, because
Yeah.
that kind of like is just outside of my musical ability, so it's something to
Right.
stretch for.
It's not that
Um,
easy to play the gong, to be
I,
honest.
I think not. Yeah, it looks deceptive. Yeah. Mm.
yeah. Also the space. I mean, I really love the while I stayed at Funai. It's a wonderful
Yeah.
space, but I'd never worked in a thrust stage, and
Right.
so learning to calibrate, uh, because I mean, our voices really carry in the space, and
Yeah.
we weren't mic'd for the plane. We had music, we had instruments, and no microphones
Right.
on us, which is at that point for me was new in Singapore theater.
Right.
But also it was hard for me to calibrate my voice because I always felt like I wasn't being heard in the theater. And I
Okay.
think it took us all like the first week to get
Yeah.
used to it.
Right.
And
Wow.
we had notes from our stage manager going, "You guys are shouting. You can pull it back a bit. It's okay. We can hear
Right.
you."
The
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
week, I think, was we were all shouting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But the acoustics are very good. You don't have to do so much high volume work, right? In that space. Yeah. Okay. Junhao
Yeah.
wants to say thank you to Lisa. I appreciated your thoughts and reply on this. And Merdeka is a great watch. Highly recommended. Thank you so much, Junhao, for that shout out. Um, Johannes wants to tell Z that Z did really well playing Rabana for Lanchang Kuning.
Oh,
Yeah, that's great.
thanks,
Yeah.
thanks, Noor,
In
because
case,
I think
yeah.
you just came on a good night. You should have seen the nights when I screwed up and had to, yeah.
I want to say,
But
in
thank
case
you.
Brendon's feeling left out, Brendon, you were good at the gong too.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's very obvious when you make a mistake on the gong. So it's like, no,
That's right. Yeah.
seriously.
So I would just like not hit it if I wasn't sure, and like, oh, what happened? But on bad nights.
That also takes some control. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Really high skilled playing there. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so another inspiration for the work was the Asian Civilizations Museum, where they had a exhibition which is called Raffles in Southeast Asia, which I think kind of over-promised and under-delivered because I thought it was going to be a lot more critical, but I think at the end of the day it wasn't that critical. So next slide. But definitely because I was visiting quite a few museums and this was the inspiration, the set design, the idea also came out from wanting to sort of construct our own museum, right? Like a private museum in our Funan Theatre. And because we owned the space, we could really go crazy and put like a bust here and the paintings hanging from everywhere. And in fact, we wanted to also put stuff in the lobby, but that was gonna like really crowd things up. Okay, next slide. Okay, so even the props and the costumes in the play were based on certain museum artifacts. Yeah, and as you would know, next slide. One of the things that happens in a play is that certain props become replaced. So we would start a scene using a prop like a tanja, for example. That's the thing on the left, the Malay headdress, and then we end the scene with this bicon hat. And I think the idea behind it is if the items on the left were what we saw in an ethnographic museum, by the end of the play, because we're talking about decolonizing and all that, they would be replaced by all these British objects, which means that we're kind of like trying to reverse the ethnographic gaze, right? Now we are looking at the British rather than the British gazing at us. Okay, next slide. Okay, and just now Kristen was asking about the different stories that we chose. One is the sacking of the Court of Job Jakarta. So I'm just gonna go very briefly for all these. Yeah. So what happened was that this is the bad Raffles that we don't really know about because we seem to only know about him in the year 1819. But in the year 1812, he ordered a whole troop of sepoys to attack the Court of Job Jakarta and to install a new sultan who some might argue was a puppet, right? So if I'm not wrong, it's Sultan Hamengkubuwono II was replaced by Hamengkubuwono III, who was a lot more friendly to British interests. Okay, next slide. So there was colonial violence, by the way. Yeah. So in this slide, I put the dissolution of the Johor Real Sultanate rather than to write about the treaty that was signed in 1819 or 1824, because I think this is one way in which we look at the period or event from an indigenous perspective. So for them, British or Dutch arrivals was something really traumatic, was something actually quite harrowing because it led to the breakup of this empire. Yeah. So I remember the scene was called "The Line is the Wound," and the line is the one that was drawn across a map that divided Johor Real Lingga into two spheres of influence, right? The British one on the northern side, Malaya, Singapore, and then the Dutch one, the southern parts, just most of the islands of Indonesia. Okay, next slide. We also looked at these two stories that Brendon told. So Brendon, you're very hardworking. You had to tell two different stories. And one's the story of Said Yassin in the year 1823 that was recorded in Hikayat Abdullah. So he was someone who stabbed Farquhar, right? But not necessarily because it was assassination, but nevertheless, he was treated as if he had committed treason and his body was hung in a gibbet and displayed. The other story is the trial of Dr. Charles Pagla. And Brendon, as a Eurasian person, I really enjoyed your performance of this, and I wondered whether you had heard of this story before and how you connected to this particular character. Yeah.
Thanks, Alfian. I mean, I think I might have heard about this character, but I don't think I heard about him in a positive light. To be honest, I didn't know a huge amount about the character, or not the character, the person, before Merdeka, but my sense was that he was somehow tarnished by his experience. That was the sense I got.
Right.
But yeah, so it's really interesting to go through the process of playing this person as someone trying to do the impossible, really trying to protect his community in impossible circumstances. So
right.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Brendon. Okay, next slide. Okay, and then we had the Rani of Jhansi Regiment, which is an all-female regiment under the auspices of the Indian National Army during wartime. Next slide. And Z, you were one of the characters in this scene where we looked at the anti-conscription protests in the year 1954, a lot of school students, and I believe it was not the first time that you acted a character in that period of history. You did a short film as well. Tell us a bit about that.
I did a short film for Function 8 in 2013, I think, or maybe 2011 or something, about the main 13th generation. I can't remember too much about the project, but yeah, by now I've played characters from the 50s or 60s in the Chinese middle school protests 3 times by now. Yeah. So for whatever reason, I have
you've cornered the market on that. It seems, yes,
I do seem to have. I mean, no, but it's a great honor because I did not know that we had such a history of advocacy, resistance,
student activism.
At all. I didn't know. So I'm that's something I learned.
And was it always the same white uniform in all your roles, or did you get to switch to a different school? No, it was always the same school.
No. Yeah.
That's a really specialized role, Z, I have to say.
I know, yeah.
Which you obviously, you certainly can put that in your CV as one of your specialties.
I think I should,
Playing Chinese student activist, Next slide.
May I just say something at this point?
Please, of course.
Yeah, Z, the short film that you were in was the 60th anniversary of the May 13th event. So it was the 2014.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and it was screened at a lunch of the old left, as we call it. I mean, the former Chinese, the former student activists and labor union activists and so forth. And it really was very well received. People were moved.
Well, I was moved because I was at the lunch, and to see a whole room full of older people who championed this in our past surprised me, So
It's wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, so another story is the Fajar trial in 1954. Yeah, so for those of you interested in this, you can just look it up. It's a very interesting trial, and I think one of those moments when students who are from the university form solidarity or alliances with the Chinese educated students. Yeah. Next slide. That's our final slide. And at the end of the play, we invite the audience to come on stage to inspect all the different objects in our so-called private museum, right? So it started out as an ethnographic museum looking at, say, certain collections from Singapore, Malaysia, exotic, etc. But in the end, in all those particular boxes that the audience is peering at, you'll find British objects, yeah? And then all the paintings or photographs that you find hung up are all those of people that I think we try to claim as anti-colonial heroes in the play. Yeah, so instead of like Raffles and all that, we have Charles Pegler, we have the students from 54, we have someone from the Rani or Jhansi regiment. Okay, all right, so let's bring out our 4 square image again. Yay! Okay, thank you. For those of you who are tuning in, thank you for joining us. Please, if you got any questions for us, do send them to the comments, whether you're on Facebook or whether you're on YouTube. Yeah, we will be able to see them. Hieronymus, you can, yeah, I mean, I know your comments are very, very long, and you can still keep them long, but also be aware that sometimes like there's dot 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 and I don't know where the rest of it is. Yeah, but I'm not discouraging you from sending in your long comments or questions. Okay, so one of the things that I did was to ask the actors to think of some questions that they can ask our historian guest today. Yeah, because I think it's always a privilege to have someone who's from outside the process, from outside theatre, to come join us and have these conversations. I always think we should do more of those, right? Because sometimes we can be so in our particular silos. Yeah. So anyone wants to ask, Z or Brendon? Your question to Lisa.
I feel like I want to ask a question that Jo
Sure.
had, or Jo Kukathas, our director, since she's not here and we really miss her. So Jo had a question for you, Lisa. What episode in Singapore history would you like to see on stage and why?
Yeah, it's very much along the lines along the lines of the question that you asked to Z, which is, can you tell me about one historical incident you wish others knew more about? And then we had a follow-up to that. Which character's perspective would you tell it from? So, I mean, I sense that, Alfian has asked 1, 2, 3, 4. He himself asked 2 questions, and he asked 2 questions of each of the participants as well. And the questions I had beforehand, 2 days before, and I really, sort of needed the time to think things through. But if you look carefully, the questions fall into a certain kind of interest. One is, what other histories can we do? The other is, how can we cooperate with you historians?
Yes.
Along those lines,
Right.
what are so it's how do you say, it's very interesting.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
What episode in history would you like to see on stage and why? I think the episodes that I would have that would have arisen out of my research and writing and so forth have received quite a good airing, not only in Merdeka but in other places, and for that I'm really gratified. So I had to think again, what could I think of? And one came to mind, and I think I like it. And I like it because it didn't come from me.
Right.
It was not my interest. It was okay, I'll tell you what it is first, and then I'll backtrack.
Yeah.
is a story of Sang Nila Utama Secondary School.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Mm,
Why am
mm,
I interested in it? I'm interested in it because this question about the school arose during the Bicentennial.
right.
Right. One of the former Malay ministers of state, I believe he is retired. He's also on the panel of the Bicentenary Committee.
Right. Yeah.
Raised the question of Sangila Utama School. He not to the panel. He earlier on he tells us in the Straits Times that he had requested for a street name.
Yeah.
A street to be named after the school.
Right.
The site of the school used to be, the building is no longer there. It's going to be a new Bidadari HDB housing estate. So he says,
Right.
we need new names for roads. Why don't we call
Yeah.
one Sang Nila Utama? Well, he didn't get an okay for that.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
He wrote to the press and then he gave us a history of the school. First Malay secondary school. Yeah, we all know that. Okay, founded in 1960. I think it
61.
was 61. The early years of the PAP, what I would
Right.
call the Merdeka years.
Hmm.
And he then mentioned the importance, the significance of the school.
Right.
Not only is it the first Malay school, it gave the opportunity to Malay girls to go to school.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because after, during the colonial period, there were no Malay secondary schools. Education was up to primary 4, after which you switched to English stream schools.
Right.
And when that happened for the girls, the schools tended to be run by missionaries.
That's right.
Hence, they were kept away from schools.
Right.
So when Sang Nila Utama came about, girls had an opportunity to go to school and they went to the university.
Right.
In significant numbers.
Yeah. So
Wow.
Ready-made for a play, ready-made for...
And can I just say though,
sorry.
I think I have a personal connection to this because both my parents are from Sang Nila Utama Secondary School. Both of them. Yeah. So they first met in that school. So I just might be the person to write this play.
It's a musical then. It has to be.
I don't know what it is, but and it's an interesting story because my father was head prefect, my mother was vice head prefect, and I believe right. Well, if I went to a Malay school, maybe I could become principal. But what was interesting was that they were doing very well in school, and then after that, separation happened, right? And of course, after that, you had the decline of Malay education. So I think I feel like there's the Nanta story, but with the people who are Malay educated also, there was a lot of trauma as well regarding the ascendancy of English and the fact that a language in which they could best express themselves, they could best express their intellectual ideas, became a second-class language as opposed to English, right? Yeah. So thank you for that, Lisa. I think that's something to keep in mind because obviously I have a personal connection. Yeah. Fiki has got a question, if I might just pull it out. And his question is for the actors. So both Brendon and Z. Did you talk to any audience members of the Merdeka who shared how the play impacted them? And could you share those stories if so? Thank you so much.
Bren, can you remember? I don't know.
It feels like a different world, I mean, it really does feel like, we could go to the theater and talk to people, so I'm struggling, to be honest with you. I can't. Thank you. It's a great question. I wish I could give you a better answer than what I have right now, which is, there was I'll give you a general remembrance of what people said. There was a sense of, why haven't we heard these stories before? Which is what I felt reading the script, being in the play, and maybe had started to take it for granted by the time we were open, and then was reminded again and again by audience members going, I've never heard these stories.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the thing that struck me.
Mm.
I had a young boy who was with the mother, and
Mm.
then she said, "Oh, he's never liked history before. He hates studying history in school, you know." And I think this was like before they watched the show. And then after that, they came out, and mother came up to me. I saw the boy again, so I said, "How do you still hate history?" And he said, "Now not so much." So,
Mm.
so I felt like, yeah, achievement unlocked. I think this play
Yeah.
did something. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Yes,
I think schools brought their classes to watch as well, right? So
that's right. Yes.
for individual school kids. Yeah.
We had a few school bookings as well. Oh, a few questions come in. Anne just wants to say, great play and actors enjoyed it. Thank you. Patricia says, question to the panel. It may be a bit of an overgeneralization, but I do feel that the last history book most Singaporeans have read was their social studies textbook. How do you think we can foster a love or interest for Singapore history among Singaporeans? Any suggestions, anyone?
So I loved history in secondary school.
Yay.
And okay, this is I'm going to try to keep it short. I was in a class that allowed us to study world history. So like Second World War, First World War, Second World War, Cold War, that kind of thing. And it was interesting because you got to see different perspectives, and you could see that there were opposing points of view that came into contact with each other and had effects. I don't get the sense that the way I don't know. I've been out of school for 20 plus years. I don't know how they teach history in schools today. I hope it's with a bit more of a sense of there being more than one point of view. So being able to see that there were different actors in play and find the narrative that way, or not, that was what made me really enjoy studying history in secondary school. And I think we need more of that in the syllabus, if it's not there already.
Yeah. I just want to say very briefly, there was one workshop I went to, which is about looking at history. And one exercise we did was really interesting, which is design your own history textbook cover. And then I think it makes, students really think what would they consider important in history and what they would want to put in that cover. Yeah. Okay. Lisa, do you have any suggestions on how can we foster a love or interest for Singapore history among Singaporeans?
I must say that I'm rather impressed by the Singapore history school textbooks these days.
Okay, great.
They do ask students to look at evidence and evaluate and come up with answers of sequence of things and so forth. So I mean, you can't run the schools that you can't run the schools now the way you did in my time, or perhaps in the time of you all as well. You have to engage the students. Okay,
absolutely.
So
Great.
It's good to know things have changed.
I think so.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so question again for the actors. Kirsten wants to ask, thanks, Brendon and Z. I was thoroughly entertained and moved by your performances. So 2 questions there. Number 1, was it difficult moving in and out of the multiplicity of characters you had to play? Also, number 2, given the number of accents you guys had to put on, were you playing it for realism or for laughs or perhaps as some sort of political gesture? Okay, should I just leave this here for a while for you to take it in?
Yeah.
Who wants to answer? Okay, maybe
Bren, you want to go first? I always go first.
Okay.
Yeah, your turn now, Brent.
Sure.
Yeah. Was it hard to move in and out? And then what about the accent work?
I think it's strange. I'm actually going to say yes. Not by the time we got to performance, because the beauty of working in theater is we train for those moments. We train to make it look seamless and easy, and hopefully that's how it looked for the audience. So I think that's part of the magic of what we do in theater, is to work so that we can achieve those magic moments on stage. So by
Right.
the time of performance, no, I think we got into our groove and we were able to do it, but it took a lot of work to get there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The second part of the question, I think there was a discussion how when we start the play, we kind of put on these. Certainly, I put on a very kind of false
Mhm.
pa- parod- parody
Mm.
parody British accent at
Right.
the start, and then
Yeah.
as we progress through the stories, we sort of move closer and closer to try to play them as close to people. I think that's what we decided.
Right.
If memory serves me
Yeah.
correctly.
I think the most controversial one that I had to do was I had to put on an Indian accent to play
Right.
she was a recruiter
And
basically
Lakshmi,
for
right?
the Rani of, yes, that's her name,
Yes, and
sorry.
Lakshmi's 27. Yeah.
Yes, it's all coming back now.
Yes.
So we had discussions about, whether I should put on an accent,
Mm.
if I should, to what extent. I certainly did not intend to play that at all for laughs. I
Mm.
think we tried to
Mm.
keep it as general and neutral as we could,
Right.
but while still conveying that she was an Indian, she was a character from India. Yeah, that I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, Alfian, there were questions, right, from the audience at that time about the decision to get a Chinese actress to play an Indian character as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think, I mean, we have this ensemble, and I think the form of the play is that everyone is doing multiple role playing, right? But I think also sometimes we contend with a history of bad faith performances of other races,
True.
So I think that's also something that we deal with, that because sometimes they're done for comic effect or for caricature and all that. Then when we step into that terrain, I mean, that there is that baggage that haunts it, right? Yeah, all through
Yeah.
no fault of our own. I think we all try in various ways to negotiate with those things, but definitely I think power relations play a huge part in it. I think it's because the British were the colonizers. If we play up their accent and parody, that's okay. But then I think if you're looking at more less empowered minorities, etc., then I think it's a different ball game. Yeah. Okay. I think a
So
couple of more.
Alfred, can I just jump in
Sure.
one second and just say that
Yeah.
I really love that scene. And I really love how Z played that character, because if you think of maybe the opposite of parody, that's what it was. It was playing the truth of that person, and that's why I'm I got to be audience for that moment because I was sitting on the stairs and watching it every night, and I really love that character and the way that Z played it. And yeah, so it wasn't at all parody or sending up, or it was really playing the truth of who that person was.
Right. Because
Thank you, friend.
no, I mean that's lovely, and I also want to point out that sometimes, I mean, the alternative to not playing accent, for example, not playing certain language or gestures, is that you are erasing that character, right? You are saying, as a Chinese person playing this character, I'm just gonna foreground my Chineseness, and that I think also would not be a fair portrayal either. Yeah. Okay. So wow, all the good questions are coming in at this late stage. But let's try to deal with a few of them. Maybe Lisa will want to take this. I think it's a very fascinating question. Do you think the bicentennial year actually erected a new pedestal to Raffles? For example, Raffles House on Fort Canning, etc.
I think the bicentennial year was meant to put Raffles on a new pedestal.
Okay.
Okay, whether or not we accept that is a different story.
Okay.
Okay.
So you think it did, huh? Okay, great. Yeah. No, that's interesting because for the centenary, he was moved to a more prime position, right? Quite literally, he got Doric columns and like plants and flowers. And I think it's repeated itself like 100 years later, that the commemoration was also to create this much more elaborate pedestal for him. Yeah. Okay, this is more common. To say how can we get people interested in history, right? Singapore's version of Hamilton. Yay. but we are not derivative, right? We can come out with our own stuff, right? We don't need to copy these things, right? Okay, but honestly, I do think that teaching from one textbook is to the detriment of learning history. Brendon's class method would have caught imagination more. Okay, great. Amanda Lee Ko, the writer, has some comments and questions. She says, Amanda here watching on my mom's FB account. Kirsten and I love Merdeka so much. We stayed up till 4 a.m. talking about how we had opened our minds. My question is, with so much of our modernism tied up with our colonialism, with our Anglophone lingua franca separating us from our roots, but at the same time bringing us closer to each other across races, what do you reckon is the best way in which we can decolonize our minds when we have been engineered both by the Singapore state and ... Okay, so I think kind of similar to Hieronymus' questions in the beginning, how can we decolonize our minds, considering that, we are so steeped in it? Yeah.
Is that a question for us? Oh.
I mean, it's a difficult question. I mean, it's a question that actually we want the audience to take home, right? When we did Merdeka, it's not something where we are going to give them an answer by the end of the play or somehow give them a manual or toolkit as to how to do this, but
yeah, neither do I think audiences expect that.
Yeah. So I mean, not to sort of like wriggle out of this, but I do think, it's your call. The ball is in your court. Okay, Repo, I was deeply moved when I watched Merdeka. Kudos to the team, and I particularly love all the actors and their performances. Pao Kun said Singaporean Chinese are cultural orphans. For me, this gave me a new perspective on how I see myself as a Singaporean and not stuck on a heritage across the ocean. A question to the team. As an audience, is there such a thing as a colonial gaze? If so, how can audiences play a part in decolonizing? Long question, great comments. I'm going to say the same thing I said to Amanda. Ball is in your court. As you can see, I'm really going briskly through all that. We have a lot of late stage comments and questions. Okay, Vidya asks, Alfian, as you're writing, do you think of those ethnographic objects as props, as costume, or perhaps even as themselves actors in the unfolding narrative? Wow. Good question. The best way to answer this is all three. Next question. Patricia says, thank you for answering my questions. Lucky enough to catch the play in real life last year and really enjoyed it. Okay. And we have a very long comment by Hieronymus here, who's chronically incapable of writing short comments. If I have to answer my own question, I would like to respond in my own colonial history. Like many Chinese families, my family was affected by the Sukching massacre. And when the Japanese left, one of the things the British did was to base their war crimes investigations only in Singapore and conducted a majority of trials there, 131 trials. At that time, there was almost no legal precedent for war crime trials, and it was the colonial legal structures. In fact, it's ... I'm so sorry you sort of run. Okay, but this is interesting, I think. One of those things that would make it kind of like ambivalent about how colonialism has maybe contributed or in some cases provided some reparations or relief, right? Yeah. Okay, I think we can end with this final question, which I kind of like. I think it's nice to wrap up with this from Futin Wong. He's asked this earlier, but I think he thinks, okay, I really want this question answered, so he's asking it again. Who are your heroes and do they need to fall too? Okay, I'm going to sit with that for a while. Anyone wants to take that? It's our final question for the night.
That's a big question. I mean, I have personal heroes in theater, in life, and some of them will come and go as you know. I think it is true for all of us. Do they need to fall? Yeah, I think they do because if I don't think that putting someone on a permanent position of hero does anyone any good. I mean, that's my belief. I think we're all in this experience. I'm going to get a bit weird. I don't know what the word is, but sort of like this is, I guess, belief, right? So I think we're on this human experience together, and if we keep putting people into this position where they are impossible of failing, they cannot fail. That doesn't do them or us any good. So yes, eventually they have to fall. Not right now because they're doing good things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. See?
I think I second what Brendon said. I personally often don't subscribe to the concept of heroism because I don't believe in putting people on pedestals. I think you can admire them, respect them, love what they do. But yeah, I just don't think it's healthy. I'm repeating what Brendon said really. So
Sure.
I'm going to keep it short.
Okay, so you don't really have heroes, and you think they should be down to earth.
I mean, I have a hero, AOC, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes.
But I certainly don't venerate her and think her godlike or anything like that.
Yeah, great. Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, heroes should not mean that the person is flawless.
Mm.
You can respect, you can admire, you can want to follow in the footsteps of certain people with full knowledge that they have flaws and they're human after all. So we can always not change heroes, outgrow heroes, and look for someone else. But it's good to have someone or something to look up to.
Right. Yeah. So for me, my heroes, I think I have a lot. So, which maybe makes the concept of a hero meaningless when you have so many. You're not special. You're just one of my many heroes. But I have literary heroes. I have people who've written books that's completely changed the way I think and opened my mind. Obviously, Lisa is one of them. Someone like Lily Zubaida Rahim. Someone like Teo Yo Yen. Sociologists, historians, etc. But I think that question is interesting because it assumes that someone like Raffles, if Raffles must fall, then our personal heroes also must fall. But I think Raffles is not put on a pedestal because he's a hero. I think he's being put up there because the state is trying to narrate a certain kind of history. It's not saying that, there's nowhere in that narrative which is that he's a hero, it's just that he's a founder. And then there's also the sense that because he's a founder, then Singapore history should start from 1819. And the history that precedes all that is problematic because it might lead to like certain ancestral claims, whatever, the stuff that Rajaratnam has talked about, right? Yeah. So I think these are quite different things that I don't think Raffles is on a pedestal because it's his hero. Yeah. And for us personally, we do have heroes, but at the same time, we think it does no justice to them if we keep having unrealistic expectations of who they are, right? Yeah, they're human like us. Okay, maybe no question, just a last comment. Thanks so much. So the play last year with the Q&A and today's forum brought some more great food for thought. Kudos to all of you. Amazing script and acting should be compulsory watching for all Singaporeans. Thank you so much, Ravin, for your comment and for giving me such a wonderful way to close this session. Yeah. So thank you once again for our actors for joining us. Thank you so much. Jo Kukathas, if you're watching this, we miss you, but another time perhaps. Yeah. And Lisa, thank you so much also for joining us all the way from Australia. And those of you who stayed on with us and listen to this, tell your friends about it. The play Merdeka is still going to be on all the way until Sunday. So I might say, if I say so myself, it's a perfect play to watch in the lead up to National Day. Yeah, it is a National Day play. Yeah, and we must remember that Merdeka isn't just a Malaysian thing. When Singapore gained independence, the cry of Merdeka resonated island-wide. Okay, so thank you again to our audience, and see you soon at our next live chat. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.